to get used to this. There we go. Might be a bit. Oh, should be right back. Hello, hello. I can tell my hair is going to fall right out of this bubble. I'm going to decline. I'm not sure if I know those people. Someone wanted to co-host. I apologise if we are mutuals, but I didn't recognise any of you, so I do apologise. I'm going to start in a few minutes, just so we've got a few more people to join the live, and then class will be in session. The music I'm playing, by the way, is by... Oh, I'm going to butcher their name, and I do apologise. It's the Fighters, the Featers. I honestly don't know how to pronounce their surname. I do apologise. But I've listened to their music for a long time, and yeah, that's what's playing in the background. So. There's a lot of people that want to kind of co-host, and again, I don't know you. I do apologise. Bear with me a second. So again, just going to wait another couple of minutes and then I shall start. Class will be in session. I've made notes this time as well. I feel a lot more prepared than I did last week. I felt like I was woefully underprepared, and yeah, I just hi. I feel like I needed to make notes. Oh, this is an energy drink. It's the... Which one is it? The Monster one, the apple one. Not sponsored, by the way, but if anyone from Monster does want to sponsor us, please feel free, because the amount of Monster that we have drunk during D&D sessions is unreal. How are you doing today? I'm fine, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to an Iceland weekend. Here in Britain we get a bank holiday at the end of August. Looking forward to that. How are you? Oh, it's the next song. I thought I turned it down too much.
Why should I be framed?
This is an advert. There we go. Again, this isn't my music. I'm playing some fantasy music. Just something nice and soft in the background. Miss School, you want to go now? Are you doing the summer holidays? Those years are sadly behind me. The long slog of work, that's what awaits me. It's been too long. I think you'd be going back pretty soon? Beginning of September. It's so boring. Well, hopefully this will give you something to watch, and something, I don't know, it might be a little bit entertaining at least. After I've spoken for non-stop for about half an hour, I'm sure I'll trip over my words. Right, okie doke. I'm going to... I think I'm just going to get started now. So, yeah, D&D 101. So, quick recap of last session. It was just basically going through like a brief overview of how to create a character with the player's handbook. Like I said last week, it's the 2014 version. Not the new version, it's the 2014 version that I'll be going through. And so I went through the basics of character creation, what you do, and I shared one of my many sets of dice, which I will get out now, just in case I need to show which type of dice to use. I will set those to the side. So this session we're going to be going through the dwarf, elf and halfling races. There are, like I said, this is the standard 2014 version of the player's handbook. There are a lot more player races that you can choose from, but the ones that will be covered in these sessions are the dwarf, elf, halfling, which we'll cover this session. And there are the human, dragonborn, gnome, half-elf, half-orc and tiefling. So I wouldn't say it's majorly important, but it's probably good practice, especially if you've never really played it before, to just double check with your DM, with your dungeon master, to see if a certain race would be either practical or feasible during the campaign setting that they're gonna run. For example, Dragonborn and Tiefling and Drow Elves, they are less common than say the Dwarf or the High Elf or the Human or the Halfling. And in the campaign that the DM might be running, those races such as the Dragonborn or the Tiefling, they might be very rare or even like discriminated against. So like I said, especially for a new player, I wouldn't think it'd be a very fun first experience to have most NPCs to treat your character with disdain or dislike or distrust, especially when you spent so long building a character, giving them a backstory, giving them, breathing life into them, and it wouldn't be a very fun experience. I mean, for me, anyway. So always double check with your dungeon master to see which race you want to play, if that's going to be feasible in the campaign or one shot that they're going to be running. Certain races are better for playing certain classes. So if you've got an idea of a class that you would like to play, double check each race, because each race gets different additional ability points. So for example, halflings could potentially be good rogues because they get an increase to dexterity. Dwarves make good fighters because they get an increase to their constitution. Let me double check that. Yes, they get an increase to constitution. And half-orcs make pretty good barbarians because they get an increase to their constitution but also their strength as well. That being said, that's not the be-all and end-all. If you want to go ahead and play a Goliath wizard, then go ahead, go nuts. If you want to play a gnome barbarian, there's no one stopping you. But like I said, if you want like your character to be optimized, then you should double check each race before you go and choose your class as well. Each race has, like I said, certain ability scores increase for them. All the races age differently as well. Some are a lot more long-lived than others. As certain races tend towards certain alignments, but again, like I said before, it's not the be-all and end-all. So if you want to, instead of playing a lawful good dwarf, if you want to be a chaotic, evil chaotic dwarf, then again, that's up to you. Size, most player characters tend to be medium size, but some are small, such as the halfling. They are classed as small size. And if you do choose a race that is small in size, that can hinder types of weapon that you might want to use in the campaign. That is covered later on in the player's handbook, so I won't get into too much detail now. But it's good to keep in mind. Speed, that's different for. It's the same for most races, but it can differ depending on medium or small sizes, and that is more for combat, apart from anything. What else? We have languages. So the languages that you can speak, read and write will depend on the races. And again, with backgrounds or certain feats and stuff like that, you can choose more languages. So again, if you want a certain backstory for your character, it's good to try and work that in there. So you might be an elf, you may know common, elvish and abyssal, for example, or celestial maybe, depending on your class and your background. And also some races have sub-races, and all three that we're going to go through today, they have sub-races. So again, that's the dwarf, the elf and the halfling. And I'm going to take a sip of my drink before I continue. So first one we have is the dwarf, typically known to be short and stout, stubborn and stoic, known for mining and working with stones and metal. And if anybody's heard the song Diggy Diggy Hole, that's pretty much your bog standard typical dwarf. I do like sending that to a friend of mine on occasion, just to cheer him up, because that's what we used to do when we worked together. Like I said, they can be stubborn and stoic, and they like to uphold tradition. And they're one of the longer lived races, so they can hold a grudge. If you slight a dwarf, they might remember it 200 years down the line. They can also be slow to trust. But they are determined and loyal, and they've got a strong sense of justice, so they are true to their word. So if you want a dwarf on your side and they will give you their trust and things like that, they're a good companion to have. So yeah, they tend to live deep beneath the mountains, and their kingdoms can stretch for miles and miles. And they tend to populate mountains where there's ores of precious metal, or it's rich in precious gems and stuff like that. And they do have what's the word I'm looking for? Like an affinity, a liking for fine jewellery and things like that made from the precious metals and the precious gemstones, and they can, stereotypically become a little bit greedy with it. So, they'll tend to hoard and things like that. Their motivations for adventuring, again, could be for treasure. They could hear of a certain metal or a certain gem and they think, I want to bring that home for myself, for my family. They also might go adventuring in terms of on like a religious pilgrimage. If you have, say, a dwarven cleric. I do play a dwarven cleric. Bear with me a second. I do apologise, I'm not co-hosting. I'm not entirely sure I know these people are trying to co-host. I do apologise if we are mutuals, but I'm trying to make this a less of a talking point, more of a learning point. I really sound like a Poindexter, and I'm so sorry, but I'm still not used to lives. Anyway, let's continue. So yeah, motivations for adventuring. They could go on a religious pilgrimage, or try bring honour to their clan or their family name. Speaking of names, I will just open the player's handbook. And get my notes out properly. So dwarves will have a first name and a clan name, and the clan name can be potentially stripped from them if they have misused it, or if they've done something to dishonour the family, and the clan will take their name back, and the dwarf they're forbidden from using it. So some examples in the player's handbook. So these are male names, for example, Adric, Dane, Flint, Ulgar, things like that. Some female names, we have Amber, we have Eldith, we have Idle, we have Helya? Yeah, we have Helya, and clan names, things like Battlehammer, Frostbeard, I can't pronounce some of these, Iron Fist, Ungart, and things like that. Again, these aren't the be all and end all. If you want to choose, if you want to go on a like a name generating website, again, feel free to do so. So for the traits, flip my notes over. Like I said, each race has a different ability score. So for dwarves, you get a +2 to Constitution, which I think is, no matter what race I play, I try and make sure my Constitution is fairly high, at least maybe 14, because I want to make sure Constitution is what gives you your health. And so, some of the classes do have small, like lower hit die, so they can be quite squishy. Being the wizard and the sorcerer, they tend to be on the squishy side, but I always say for Constitution, I like it to be fairly high. Age-wise, dwarves, they tend to be young until they're about 50, and they can reach roughly 350 years old. So like I said, they are one of the more longer-lived races. Alignment, most tend to be lawful good. And like I said before, that you don't have to stick to lawful good if you don't feel you're the type of person that can play lawful good. I did play a lawful good character for a little while. It was very difficult. It was very, very difficult. But yeah, if you don't think you can play lawful good, you don't have to stick to lawful good as a dwarf. Their size tends to be between 4 and 5 feet, and they're quite stocky, so they tend to be around the 150-pound mark, and size-wise they are classed as medium. Speed, they have a base speed of 25 feet, so this just means how many steps they can take, like on a combat map. And again, that's something that we'll cover later on in the player's handbook. And dark vision. Every single DM knows that whenever they're explaining, you go into a cave or you go into a darkened room, they're just waiting for the players to yell out, "I have dark vision." Because I wait for it as a DM, and I've also said it so many times as a player. So dark vision is, so for the dwarf accustomed to life underground, you have superior vision in the dark and dim conditions. You can see in dim light within 60 feet of you as if it were bright light, and in darkness as if it were dim light. You can't discern colour in darkness, only shades of grey. So if it's dark, you can see 60 feet around you. Pretty straightforward there. Dwarves also have dwarven resilience, so that means they have advantage on saves against poison, and they are resistant to poison damage. So advantage, again, as I touched on it last session, so with advantage you would roll your d20 and you would roll it twice, and you would take the higher of those two numbers at advantage. And resilience means that if you are hit with poison damage, you only take half. So for example, if you got hit with a poisoned attack and the DM rolled 4 points of damage, you would only take 2 because you are resistant to that kind of damage. Same goes for other types of resistances like fire, cold, force damage, that kind of thing. Dwarven combat training, dwarves have proficiency in the battle axe, hand axe. I can't read some of my own handwriting. The light hammer and the war hammer. So again, proficiency is something that we will touch on more down the line. And tools, you have a choice of between smiths, brewers and masons tools, and that comes with more tools come with like different backgrounds and things like that. So again, that's something that might work into your backstory. Say you were a dwarf, you were working in an ale house for a couple of decades, and then you wanted to go adventuring. You might have a brewer's kit, or if you worked as a blacksmith, you might have some smith's tools. Dwarves also have stone cunning, so you would double your proficiency and then add that to any history checks for like stonework and things like that. And again, I don't want to seem like I'm rushing past it, but the proficiencies and the ability checks and things like that, we'll go through all that later on in the player's handbook. Languages, you will know Common and Dwarvish. So people say that the Dwarven language is hard and harsh. It's full of like guttural sounds and hard consonants and stuff like that. So potentially not very nice to listen to, but it fits with the dwarf. You know, they live in mountains, live underground. That's that sort of thing. Subraces, we have the hill dwarves and the mountain dwarves. So with the hill dwarves, you get another increase to ability. You get a +1 to your wisdom, and you also get dwarven toughness, which means your hit point maximum increases by 1, and then again by 1 per level. So your hit points will gradually increase. I chose this for my dwarven cleric in our Icewind campaign, and I'm glad I did, because it's proven to be a bit of a pain. Not a pain in terms of like it's a bad campaign. I love it, I really do. It's just a very, very tricky campaign in terms of survival and not dying. The other subrace is the mountain dwarf, and their ability, you get a +2 to strength. So if you wanted to be a barbarian, that would be a good choice, because the barbarian focuses a lot on strength. They also get dwarven armor training, so they are proficient in both light and medium armor. There is another subrace for the dwarf, which are the Duragar, and I didn't list it. It's not one of the more commonly used races, like commonly played races. Again, this is something, if you did want to play Duragar, it's something that you could go through with your Dungeon Master. So in the Player's Handbook it says, in cities deep in the Underdark live the Duragar, or Grey Dwarves. These vicious, stealthy slave traders raid the surface world for captives, then sell their prey to the other races of the Underdark. They have innate magical abilities to become invisible and to temporarily grow to giant size. So again, it's something that you would have to double check with your Dungeon Master to see if playing a Duragar would be something that's feasible within the campaign that they're running. So that is it for the Dwarves. We are going to move on to the Elves next. And where the Dwarves are short and stout, stocky, Elves are slender and graceful. Very much in contrast. Think Tolkien. You know, you've got Legolas, you've got Galadriel, you've got literally all the dwarves, not dwarves, literally all the elves in Lord of the Rings, stereotypical graceful slender elf. They are known for enjoying nature, music, poetry, art. They like to make their own art, they like to make their own clothing. Because they are probably the longest lived race. I may be wrong, anyone can correct me if they know better, but I think they are the longest lived race. So they can come across as aloof or distant, because things that would bother the shorter lived race, such as the humans, it doesn't really matter to them. It's like a drop in the ocean. It'd be like a mere inconvenience as to, whereas for us it'd be an entire generation, so it'd be world-shatteringly devastating, but to an elf they'd be like, it's fine, come next century this won't be a bother. So they can tend to be aloof or distant, so they're unfazed by things like that. And because of this, they tend to try and retreat from intruders where they live, like in forest lands and stuff like that, where they will try and basically outlast any intruders, try and shy away from combat, but if pushed to it, they're strategic and they do have skills with bows and swords as well, so it's not like they're pushovers. And their motivation for adventuring is more to do with exploration and skill. Like I said, they're long-lived, so they can spend as much time as they want, like honing a certain craft before moving on to the next. They can spend, for example, 50, 60, maybe 70 years. Ignore the adverts. They can spend 50, 60, 70 years maybe honing a certain craft before moving on to the next. They just like to adventure and live and explore at their own pace. Name-wise for elves, it's slightly different. So up until about the age of 100, they'll have what's known as a child name. And then once they reach around about 100, they will choose their own adult name. And again, like with the dwarves, they will have a family name as well. So examples of child names, we've got Bryn, Del, Erin. I did choose Erin as my dwarven cleric name, but these are the elven child names. We've got Mela, Thea. I did choose Thea for my high elf druid in our Strahd campaign. And when we started that campaign, my character, she was 85, and I think I worked it out that she was on a similar level maturity-wise to a 17-year-old human. And because she had spent decades in the forest with generations and generations of direwolves, because she was outcast by her family, she was very, very immature with it as well. So she wasn't a mature 17-year-old, she would be an immature 17-year-old. At some point in that campaign, she did get hit with a spell, and she got hit with, she aged 20... Sorry about that. She aged 21 years. So technically she is an adult now, but she's still got the same mentality as when we started the campaign. But typically at 100, the elves would choose then their adult names. So adult male names could be Carrick, Hemo, Imperial, Therian, Varys. Adult female names could be Kaelin, could be Keylith, could be Leah, could be Nivera, could be Soliloquy. I think I'm butchering that, I do apologise. And then family names, it's got the elven name and then the name meaning in common. So we have Leodon, which would translate to Silverfrond, and we've got things like Cynadel, which means Moonbrook. Again, you can just go on to a name generator if these aren't really to your taste. Yes, so for the elves, the ability score, you get a +2 to your dexterity. So, like I said before, the halfling, I think I said, would make a good rogue. Elves would make quite a good rogue as well, with it being an increase in dexterity for the stealth, for the sleight of hand, that sort of thing. Age-wise for elves, they are probably the most long-lived. They can live to be up to like 750. They physically tend to mature at the same rate as humans, so they would be properly physically mature up until they would reach physical maturity rather when they get to like late teens, early 20s. But up until they're 100, they just learn like knowledge of their people, their heritage and their culture and things like that. And then they would choose their adult name. Alignment, they tend towards chaotic and good. They enjoy freedom rather than like, heavily structured rule-based society. But the Drow is the exception. The Dark Elves, they live in the Underdark, and I will get to the Drow in a little while. Size-wise, it can range, again, depending on your preference, from just under 5 foot to over 6 foot. And they are slender. They're a lot more slender than the Dwarves. They tend to be 100 to 145 pounds, and again, their size would be medium. Their base walking speed is 30 feet, so again, that comes more into play during combat. And again, they have dark vision. And keen senses, so elves have proficiency in perception checks. They also have Fey ancestry, so they have advantage on saves against being charmed, and magic can't put them to sleep. So any spells that would magically put potentially a dwarf or a halfling or a human to sleep, elves aren't affected by it. Now, trance, this is something that I do love about elves. They don't need sleep. I don't know if I said in the last session, I honestly can't remember, if I went through what the difference is between a short rest and a long rest. So a short rest is usually about an hour or so. You're just either basically recuperating after combat, you're not heavily investigating anything, you're not, interrogating anybody like that, or you're just gently walking from one place to the next. I mean, that's what we do anyway. A long rest is usually at least 8 hours. Try and get the characters to have 8 hours sleep, and you've got to eat something, you've got to drink something, and you've just got to genuinely just rest, recuperate, and get your hit points back, and get any traits back on a long rest. But elves, they don't need sleep. They go into a trance, they meditate for 4 hours, and then that's then they are fully rested. That's like one of the other characters, like the half-orc or the dragonborn, getting 8 hours of sleep. And again, going back to our Curse of Strahd campaign, because Thea only needs 4 hours of sleep, being a high elf, she can go through Strahd's tome, and she can uncover the secrets and stuff like that. If Grogurg or Tyrell had wanted to go through the tome, it would have been a lot more difficult because they need those 8 hours of sleep. Language-wise for elves, they know Common and Elvish, and where I said the Dwarven language is hard and harsh, Elvish can be lilting and melodic and quite pleasant to the ears. Again, think Tolkien, the Elvish language, it's quite floaty and fluidy, that type of thing. Elves also have subraces, so they have High Elves, Wood Elves, and Dark Elves. For the High Elves, their intelligence increases by 1. They have elf weapon training, so they have proficiency in long swords and short swords, long bows and short bows. And they also know a cantrip, they can choose from the wizard spell list. I can't remember which one I gave for you, and I would check, but it's on my phone, so I can't do that right now. They also know an extra language, so like I said before, depending on the type of character you want to play, the type of backstory you want to give them, they could know Common, Elvish, and say Dwarvish, or they could know Abyssal or Celestial, depending on the type of backstory you want to give them. So that's the High Elf. For the Wood Elf, you get a +1 to Wisdom. They similarly get the elf weapon training, so that's the short and long sword and the short and the long bow. They are also fleet of foot, so instead of the base walking speed being 30, they get an extra 5 feet of movement, which can come in handy during combat. And they have the Mask of the Wild, which is... You can attempt to hide even when you are only lightly obscured by foliage, heavy rain, falling snow, mist, and other natural phenomena. So if you are, say, like it says, outside in the rain, you can attempt to hide. Any other person will just be standing there, just sopping wet through. But the Wood Elf would be able to hide. And for the Drow or the Dark Elves, again, I would, if you wanted to play a Dark Elf, I would double check with your DM to see if it was something feasible, something that they could do, before you go ahead and create a whole backstory and go through the process of making a character. So their charisma score increases by 1, and they have superior dark vision. So rather than having a 60-foot radius where you can see in the darkness, the Dark Elves have 120-foot radius, so they will be able to see further than any other race with just normal dark vision. But contrast to that, they have sunlight sensitivity, which means they have disadvantage on perception checks when in direct sunlight. So, like with the advantage, you would roll your d20 twice, but you would take the lowest number this time, not the highest. And they also have Dry Magic, so you're able to know the Dancing Lights cantrip. At 3rd level, you then get to cast Fairy Fire, but that is only once per long rest. So once you cast it, you have to take a long rest, and then you'd be able to cast it again. Similarly with darkness at 5th level, you would have to wait until you'd had a long rest to be able to cast that again. And dry weapon proficiencies, that's slightly different than the elven weapon training. You're proficient in rapiers, short swords, and hand crossbows rather than the swords and the normal swords and the bows for the other elves. That is the elves, and we're moving on to our final race of the evening, which is the halfling. So where the dwarves were short and stout, and the elves graceful and slender, halflings are small and practical. They're a lot more straightforward. They're less frivolous, and they enjoy simple comforts. Very few tend to dream of wealth, and they prefer comforts of home life. So a roaring fire, a good meal, a nice glass of wine, and some good company and good conversation. That's all a halfling needs. I think I might be a halfling. But yeah, again, think of Tolkien like the hobbits of the Shire. That's all they care about. They care about their food, they care about their family, they care about, they just care about the quiet comfort home life. Halflings do tend to be kind and curious, so they do value friendship, and they do value like relationships with their family as well. And because they are kind, they are curious, they're a lot more affable and cheerful. They tend to blend in well with dwarves and elves and humans and things like that. They're very easy to get along with, like I said, cheerful and affable. Their motives for adventuring would probably be to defend their communities, support their friends and family. Also exploration, because like I said, they're curious. They might want to see what's out there in the world. Names for halflings. They've obviously got first names, but their surnames are slightly different in terms of certain surnames might have been a nickname generations and generations ago, but it was so ingrained that it stuck and became a surname. So some surnames are like Good Barrel, Green Bottle, Hilltopple, Tosscobble, Tea Leaf. Some male names would be Ander, Corin, Eric, Garrett, Roscoe. Some female names could be Bree, Callie, Nedda, Portia, Shayna, Trim, that sort of thing. And again, as with the others, if you don't like any of those, you can always make your own. You can always make your own, or go on a like a name generator. There are more than enough on the internet out there. So for the ability score for halflings, the dexterity score increases by 2, so again they would probably make a good rogue. Age-wise, they mature at around about the age of 20, and they're not as long-lived as dwarves or elves, living to be around about 250, but they are still a lot longer lived than, say, humans. Alignments, as with the dwarves, they tend towards lawful good, and their size is small, being around about the 3-foot mark, and they tend to weigh around about 40 pounds. Their speed is like the dwarf, that is 25 feet. Again, that's more for combat, and they are lucky. I once played a halfling bard in a one-shot, and I kept forgetting that I was lucky, and that means you get to re-roll a natural one. So if your attack, your ability, or your saving throws, if you roll a nat 1, you get to roll again, but then you must use the new roll. So if the new roll's a 2, you've got to use the 2. But I kept forgetting, and I was really, really annoyed at myself. Halflings are also brave, so they get advantage on saves against being frightened. So again, you are rolling your d20 and taking the highest number. They also have halfling nimbleness, so halflings can move through the space of a creature that is at least one size above them. So that would be a medium creature or anything higher, so a large, anything like that. But they couldn't do that through another halfling space because they would be the same size. Languages, they would be common and halfling. And whereas the halfling language, they don't guard it, it's not like a secret, but they hold it close to their chest, sort of thing. They will teach it to people that they know and they trust, but it's not something that they'll bandy about freely. With dwarves and elves, they do have written literature, but halflings, there's not a lot of written literature, but they are big on storytelling, so their oral tradition is a lot bigger than their written literature. So they would be telling stories around a campfire, telling stories to their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, that sort of thing. Hair in my face. The sub-races, we have the Lightfoot and the Stout Halfling. So the Lightfoot Halflings get a +1 to Charisma, and they are naturally stealthy, so they can attempt to hide even when only obscured by a creature of like one size or higher. So like with the Wood Elf, they can hide in, say, heavy rain or snow or anything like that. If a halfling is with, say, a dwarf and a human, then they can attempt to hide behind their companions. Stout halflings have an extra +1 to their constitution, and they have stout resilience, and I think that's the same as the dwarves. So they have advantage on saving throws against poison and resistance to poison damage. So again, advantage, you're rolling the d20 and you are taking the highest number, and with the resistance to poison damage, you only take half damage of what the DM rolls. And that is all I have prepared for today's lesson. So we've gone through the dwarf, the elf, and the halfling. I don't know if anyone has any questions. If they want to ask, do feel free. I'm going to take a drink. Again, of my Monster. Monster, please sponsor us. But next week we're going to go through human, dragonborn, and gnome races. I do quite like the dragonborn. They get a breath weapon, and depending on the colour of the dragonborn, depends on the type of damage and whether or not it's linear or it's in a cone. So we will get into that next week. And my voice must be grating on everybody, and my throat's getting quite sore. And this is the most talking I've done all day. So I'm going to say, if nobody has any questions, I'm going to end the live, and I will post this in a few days on YouTube. I'm not entirely sure if I can say that on TikTok, but we will find out. So thank you to everyone who has watched, and I hope this has been at least a little bit entertaining. I also hope it's been a little educational. Again, next week I'm going to go through the human, dragonborn, and gnome races. And yeah, hope you have a good bank holiday weekend, and I will see you next week.